So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, order of business. I don't think there's any issues. Public appearances. I see none. Consent agenda. I'd ask for motion for approval of the September 26, 2018 school board minutes. I just do much. I just asked for approval of the consent agenda as presented. Sorry.
So moved.
Reading too much. It's been moved and
Second.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Recognition information.
Okay, we had a very successful homecoming 2018 last week. High school students enjoyed dressing up every day and were able to spread the school spirit by holding assemblies in other district schools. Silver Eagle varsity football team capped off the week with a win over Stoughton on Friday night. Congratulations to our girls golf and girls tennis programs as they prep golfer Clarissa O'Reilly Dye and tennis player Haley Moons for their respective state tournaments this week. In other athletic news, Monroe Grove High School senior McKenna Warnock has committed to the University of Iowa in their women's basketball program.
I can give her a good doctor. Very nice.
Mary Koopmans of Cottage Grove was recently featured on Wisconsin Public Television's show Wisconsin Life. Mary is a 7th grader at Glacial Drumlin School who has an autonomic nervous system disorder and a neuromuscular condition which limit her movement. And she describes in the video how taking classes at Kale School of Dance in Verona has impacted her life. Unbelievable video, so you have a link to it in your report. And then there's a second link as well that describes the life of Mary's service dog, Olive. And lastly, it's National School Board Week. Thank you for your service on the Monroe Grove School Board and for your commitment to our community and our students.
You
Thank
did.
Thank you.
Gotta let everybody in the work.
Could we ask the audience to give us some hands?
Oh.
And if we could, please, before we move on to the agenda, could we get a quick picture of our school board?
Sure.
No, sir.
You stay in the door.
Where do you want us?
Right here.
Actually, if you guys, if you can stay where you are.
Screenshot the TV.
Dan, Oh, you can I pull go right those here?
We're just gonna take.
Flags
That's all
out?
gathered on Dean like it's his birthday.
Oh, like the flag is nice.
The school perception survey.
I'm sorry.
I just where to get out.
Oh, no, we got a question.
What? Oh, sorry, recognition?
Yeah, drama has their first sectional performance this weekend in Reedsburg. That's one.
Nice.
And nobody we know is Caleb either.
Yeah. Well, he's got a very small part. Yeah.
No good.
But it's good. It's
Wonderful.
Radium Girls. It's a
Oh, really?
story of the
That's a good play.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing it.
Okay, then the WASB School Perceptions Annual Board Development Survey Tool. In front of you, you have a letter from Association of School Boards with your own unique code. Sometime within the next week or two. Let's make it 1 week. Please go online and fill out the survey.
I think I just filled out last year's. A couple weeks ago.
And we'll get a look at that, and we'll use that to, in the development process.
And Peter, you might want to make a point of, everybody's got their own access code,
Exactly.
so you can't lose this paper. I mean, you
Thank
can,
you.
because Joyce probably has copies,
Yeah.
but you can't use somebody else's access code.
I think it came upon it.
You can't lose it. Right.
You can, yes, you can only use those once, so don't lose that. Superintendent's report, Dan.
Okay, so the referendum communication update had a list of the events from the last 2 weeks. I won't read through all of those, but again, to just keep you informed of some, and a number of you have been able to attend, some of these as well. So, and reminder, we have display boards, posters, and so on at various places in our communities, and so we'll continue, the efforts of trying. The most important thing, as you all know, is making sure that we have a well-informed community when they make their decisions at the polls. So we'll continue those efforts right up and through the day of the election.
Do you have rough numbers on attendance at Winnequa and at Cottage?
We do, thank you for asking. So I believe at Winnequa, I recall the number is 29. Joyce, I don't know the number.
Did you
About
count
23.
everybody?
About 23, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
About 23 in Cottage Grove, I think.
Okay, but like, so that includes
Eight of
staff
those
and.
people were, no, but that was like 23 people not coming aboard, and about 29 at total on at Winnequa.
Yep.
And I am gonna go to Taylor Prairie Parent Teacher Conferences on the second night, which is the 25th, I think. From 3:30, if anybody else wants to join me at some point, that'd be awesome. I'm just gonna sit at the table. It's the 25th, and it runs from 3:30 to, I forget, 7:38, something like that. But I'm, if nobody stops by, I probably won't stay the whole time, otherwise I just.
I'd go with you if you want.
All right, well, yeah, and you don't have to be there right at 3:30. I'm gonna be there right at 3:30, but I just thought if somebody else wanted to show up for part of the time, it might be nice to have two people.
Sure, I'll be there too, because
Okay, cool.
my kids are there.
Yeah, so just, and that's really just if people stop by and ask questions. I'm not gonna chase people down the hall to have
How do you
them.
do Cottage Grove? How do you do Taylor Prairie?
Hmm?
I can't sit in those seats.
I don't see it.
Well, they might give us wheelchairs. I didn't think of that.
So, yeah, just a reminder, as you know, Katie is keeping the event calendar up to date, so anything at all that you may want to attend, just contact Katie. And
Okay.
all right, the second item, I just wanted to give a brief report regarding our Dane County Equity Consortium. I think I'd reported out earlier about the formation, and we had our first full planning meeting. And I apologize, I meant to be able to share out minutes with you. I don't have those available, but I'll make sure I get those for you to read. But again, this is something I know that our Teaching and Learning Equity Committee will have an opportunity to talk about in more detail, but I'm very, very encouraged about the enthusiasm I'm seeing from all of the schools in Dane County, and the idea that this is such important work that we can work together on. And so we'll make sure that as we are committed to meeting on a monthly basis. So the consortium individuals will be meeting the same day that we have our normal Dane County Superintendent's meeting. So they meet in the morning, for 3 hours, and then representatives from that group meet with the superintendents when the first part of our meeting, and we'll continue that, throughout the school year. So the first part right now has really kind of been the organization, but the other thing that I wanted to mention is the involvement of the school boards was a topic of discussion at our last meeting. We are going to reach out to John Ashley from WASB and make sure that he's aware of the work that we're doing to make sure that we're, because we certainly know that we want to make sure that we're not just the organization should be informed so that we're not, going in a different direction perhaps, or at least, any efforts that he is making with the staff. We've talked about at the Milwaukee Convention, it would be great if we could get all the Dane County board members together for part of that time to have a progress update on where we're at and so on. So it's more to come with that, but I thought we had some initial good ideas, and I'm really glad that, our superintendents, see the importance of having our board members in partnership, with our work. So I think what I'll try to do is on a monthly basis keep this as a regular report and keep you informed.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Board reports, Dean, Personnel Committee?
Well, I didn't come very well prepared, but I can report, and I'm sure other members of the committee can supplement it. I think my real takeaway was we spent a lot of time hearing teacher concerns and others on the teacher compensation plan, and we agreed. Dan, I don't know where our status is on it, but we agreed to engage in some revision, or at least consider revisions of some areas of the teacher compensation plan. And whether that will be done by that committee or a separate committee, we haven't decided. And Dan, you and I can talk and make a recommendation to the board.
Any discussion of the changes that are being contemplated?
Excuse me? Any
Discussion, I mean, do you have anything to say about the changes that are being contemplated, or?
Well, one of the things that began this was the request for some predictable salary increases over a period of every year, or 5 years, or 10 years, and so forth, in category 3 of that teacher compensation plan. But I think there are other issues and other questions also arose. That's the money end of the issue. But I think it's probably a good time to take a look at it and confirm it, make some revisions in it, and so forth.
Yep.
And whether that committee does it or whether we have a separate committee, that I think it depends on an assessment of how much time and how long it's going to take.
Yep. I guess I'll just add, there was a little bit of discussion, we talked about the compensation levels, we talked primarily about salary, but, as we all know, that's a part of total compensation, so we did talk a little bit about, how do we compare with, some of the other benefits. And so the next time the Personnel Committee gets together, Jared and Nicole will have some information to share out with the committee on some of the other, the benefit, comparable information, and to consider when we continue those discussions, so.
The material that the teachers brought to us, and they brought it to the meeting before this meeting, and that they continue to want to discuss is by year, going back to a by year step increase versus originally the teacher compensation plan had 3-year increases, and when you guys did it, it had, right, Dean, 3-year bumps. Dan?
Yeah, so there was a base wage increase annually, and then there was an intention to have an additional supplemental pay every 3 years.
Every 3 years.
Right.
And that was in the document that Peter
Right,
and Susan,
that went to 1 year.
Dean, their request is for 1 year. We approved as a board year 10 and 15 recently.
Yeah, so in the last revision of the plan, as a placeholder, we put what the current minimum salaries are at those increments. And the discussion is really going to be about what those.
And so there were really 2 parts to that, I think, and we haven't really discussed the second part. And one was a yearly increase. The other was a monetary amount attached to that yearly increase. And it was our impression from Jared that those weren't amounts that were affordable to us at this time. Remember?
I'm sorry.
In that sheet,
Yearly
remember?
would be like.
The salary grid that was proposed by the
like salary
MGA.
schedule.
That's correct, that's not in our budget.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's really 2 issues, and we've agreed to continue to discuss them. Dean, was there another list of more discussion items in there that they brought?
Well, there's the whole thing of, I think there's just, we've come up with other meetings, various items that are
Yeah.
throughout there, some of which.
The last meeting was entirely about
Salary.
compensation.
Okay,
Salary.
but I don't have a list of other items that we're discussing at this time.
I'll have them.
So you made the list, not the only list we have from the teachers right now that's being discussed is the yearly list.
Yeah, what we've heard concern with some aspects, other aspects over time of that, and I think that we agreed to kind of open up a discussion to any and all items, I guess, at this point.
But the item brought by the teachers
What was steps
was only the steps.
at this last meeting, but they've brought up.
And the meeting before.
Well, but at other meetings, they have brought up the one that you've discussed a lot, which is the movement to level 4 and that type of thing too. So it's, and they brought up some of the things that, if you recall, Sue Fox, that remember, we had some commitments, that annual commitments, and we had some dollar amounts in there, and those were
Yeah.
taken out.
Well, but at the time we were talking about them, they were tentative plans. We
Yeah.
never totally agreed because we were concerned about how we could pay for those, so they were tentative.
Yeah, and the final salary plan, you know, I think it has worked well because it has provided some flexibility because of scarce resources and so forth. What teachers are looking for is predictability, which will be which if we went with the plan that they proposed, is that it would exceed our typical amount of funds that we would have each time. Our ability to sustain that is, or to make a commitment on anything that's significant, such as those, particularly, and also moving to that plan would be a costly problem as well. The current plan, I think, has been allowed flexibility to attack and address issues and problems in the salary plan on a biennial basis anyway. And a more structured plan will reduce that flexibility and give some predictability, but whether we can have the resources to meet a abstract plan or not is another question.
Okay.
But there are language issues as well. We have work to do.
All right, thank you. Susan, the policy committee?
So the policy committee met on Tuesday, and there's one policy on for possible approval tonight, and we did answer a question that was raised at the last meeting about that one. And then we had noticed there are a couple of areas of policies where with the Neola system, there is some redundancy and it becomes confusing. So we went through a number of policies related to student records, public and parent requests for information related to records, that kind of thing at this last meeting, and are going to come back proposing at the next meeting, though, to eliminate one because we've taken key parts out of it and put in another one just to avoid the redundancy and make it more clear. And then we are also still working on a new policy on equity in education, and we've talked about that for the last couple meetings, but there's still some staff input that we wanted to get on that one. And then that one we also thought it should also go not only to the policy committee, but to the teaching, learning, and equity committee, perhaps, once we see it in its final, sort of semi-final form. So that's where we are with that, and our next meeting is Tuesday, November 13th at 9 a.m.
Thank you. Eric, teaching, learning, and equity.
Teaching and Equity Committee met on September 26th, rescheduling the meeting on the 19th. And we discussed application process to have community members and parents on the committee. That was posted the week of the 1st, and we have 9 applications so far. The deadline is the October 12th. And we also have 2 applications from teachers. And we'll look at those at our next meeting on the 17th, sorry. Yeah.
And
The 17th at 5 o'clock. So we'll review those and then discuss who will be on the committee.
How many do you think you're gonna take?
I think really, one of the things we discussed on the last meeting is we didn't want to make a specific, number, because we want to look and see who the applicants are. Because we don't want to be in a situation where we say we're only accepting 6, and then we have 7 really good applicants that could contribute, so we left that open.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to say that it is still posted, the applications are still posted on the district website under news and information, and parents and community members can still apply up to Friday, October 12th. The teachers and staff were sent an email by Dan, and they can use that link and apply that.
Okay, thank you. Possible action items. Number 1, approval of revised policy 8310, access to public records. Susan, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, this is the one we saw last time, and the only question raised about it last time was the one you had raised, Peter, which was, let me bring mine up,
Right.
was whether we wanted to include a sentence about board member access, and upon consultation with the attorney, he said there is not statutory language in that, but he recommended not putting that in there because, in fact, some student records board members do not have access to. Personnel records of teachers, for example, board members do not have access to. There's some that we don't have access to, and he said it sort of implies that we have access to, there's a balancing test generally that would be applied if there were some district records that we wanted to get that we weren't just getting normally. And he just said you don't really need, he just recommended putting it in there because he thought it was misleading and it made it sound like we could see all these different records that we don't in fact have access to, when if there is something that we really have a legitimate need in order to fulfill our board role to see, we would just request it and get it.
And I apologize, I intended
Yeah, I
to
thought
copy
that's what I was
that
looking for.
into the content here. If you
Yeah.
go to the policy committee meeting, you'll see actually the written comment from
Yeah,
the attorney on
I
that.
actually did just find it
So-
by paper, so I could read it if anybody wants me to read it, but it's 2 paragraphs,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure you wanna hear it. So we as a committee decided to leave it, to not add it and leave it alone. Because there didn't seem to be a good reason to have it in there.
Right, and actually I'm satisfied on that because policy 143 has,
Right, oh, that's
has the
different. Thank
language,
you.
that
Yeah.
has sufficient language, and it's
Right.
fine, it says the documents to which we're entitled.
Oh, that was the other point.
Yeah.
This whole policy was directed toward public records, not board members, so thank you, Peter, for that. That was the shorter answer.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, so long as that, I mean, we have,
Right.
language.
Right.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I should note, there was one other minor
Oh, yeah.
change from the first reading. If you clicked on the draft under administrative content, you'll see that the office hours were stricken. We did consult with our attorney to find out, is there a requirement, because our office hours change in the summer,
Right.
and he said, no, there's no requirement to do that. To simply say they'll be available during regular office hours is sufficient. In fact, he recommended not, putting that in there, so.
right.
All right.
I'd like a motion for approval of the revised board policy 8310
So moved.
as presented. Okay, it's been moved, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is the co-curricular and additives schedule.
Again, a very positive thing we can report. We have had increasing participation in the high school HOSA program, and with that, we would like to have a second assistant advisor position to assist with that number of students. And so on the extracurricular schedule, recommending adding that. If you look on the schedule, it's comparable to other advisorships, and so we're recommending that it's a stipend of 4% of the base. So I think it's pretty straightforward.
I'd like to move approval.
Is there a second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Dean?
For public information, what's a HOSA?
Okay. And interestingly, I did put the link to the national organization, and it's for future health professionals.
Health occupations. Services.
Thank you.
Anyway, again, it's been a strong group. We've brought, it's always interesting when you go into a long-term care facility and there's this nursing assistant, and it's one of our students. And it's wonderful.
I met 3 of them when I was there.
Oh.
Over at, yeah, they have a lot of them over at, where I was at,
Oak Park Place.
yeah, and recovering there, and
No.
I kept running into
It's up to the county.
Again,
CNA types.
But it's not a
It's a
school
great
program.
program,
It
and
is.
considering that, you know, we continue to struggle with applications for nursing school and medical school, it's really wonderful that our students are.
I talked to several of them about that, and they all want to go into nursing or medical areas.
Nurse practitioners, yeah.
We should have an EOS. Educational occupations.
I got a
Okay.
question.
Thank you. Yes, Eric?
Just about the extracurriculars, I was just curious, Dan, or, I don't know, maybe Dan, your person answers. Why is it that some sports, volleyball, baseball, soccer, softball, cross-country, our head coaches are rated at 11%, when we have other sports like hockey, basketball, and football that are 14%?
Great question. So these all used to be part of the collective bargaining agreement. And then since they are no longer, we actually did have a study done about 4 years ago to try to make some of those more equitable, but most of those varsity positions did not change. And I think typically one of the major factors is the length of season.
I knew you were gonna say that.
I mean, that, right or wrong, that's where it comes from. And so, but they said those were always collectively bargained, and many of those have been in place for many years. There were some adjustments at the time we had that committee together where there clearly some programs had changed over time and there were clear inequities.
Yeah.
So I don't think we took away any, some were
Sure.
increased, but that's the best, answer I can give you.
Okay.
And
I think the time commitment the length of season is not much more or less. We're talking about maybe 5-9 days, maybe
Yeah.
at the most. The time is definitely the same amount of time.
No question. We know all of our coaches, particularly our head coaches. I mean, the amount of time to prepare is essentially almost a year-round, job. I would say the other thing that was looked at the time was comparing to other Badger Conference schools
Sure,
to
yeah.
make sure we're aligned that way.
Okay. Yes, it's been moved, yes, it is seconded already. So all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is the administrator contracts. This is essentially a minor language update to the administrator contracts related to making sure that the language regarding their health benefits matches what we're doing in the district now for everybody and the staff. I'd like a motion for approval of the 2018-2020 administrator contracts as presented.
So
Moved, is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Susan?
Dan, would you clarify the rationale for wanting to make the change?
Sure.
And the administrative position on that change?
Sure. So when the board changed the health insurance plan, 2 years ago, the contracts were not updated to reflect the current plan. And so the rationale is to bring them up to speed so they match what is the current practice.
But, so instead of changing the contract every year, it would just,
Right, so it's essentially very similar language that we have in our teacher handbooks and where we don't specify the percentage of contribution because that always is subject to change. So that we have, and that's the common language that we've used in all new administrator contracts, that we've hired over the last couple of years. And so that way it's consistent and we don't have to make that change on a regular basis.
in the administrative response,
Sure, they're aware of the change.
do they support the change?
There's no objection to the change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Future meetings. There's a couple committee meetings, it's the 17th, but on the 18th, I want to point out, we'll have a special board meeting, which is next Thursday, a week from tomorrow. Just want to confirm that with everybody, where we will take the next step with the superintendent's evaluation. And I hope everybody can make it.
When, the 18th?
It's 18th at 6:30.
That was Joyce that sent an email out. I was
Yep.
wondering whether we had an answer on that yet. I don't know
Yes,
if you heard
everybody
from
got,
or-
that was the answer, was that the 18th was the next date that people,
Did everybody respond though?
I don't think I
or
responded,
signed it?
yeah.
Yeah.
that's,
I think I
Yeah, I think you
responded.
did, everybody did, and I shared it with Peter.
yes, everybody responded.
I know I responded.
Yes, Susan?
Dan, could you redistribute to the board your kind of annual plan for bringing forward particular information on particular things at particular times?
Kind of the whole timeline
Yeah,
for the year.
it's just that I keep getting specific requests for information, and I know that we're tied up in the referendum, so we tend to spend a lot of time on that and communicating that information. And again, I received 2 more requests for learning more about the Advanced Learner Program, particularly at the elementary level. How do you identify students? And then which students have portfolios and which don't. I mean, it's just, they struggle a little bit with understanding the written policies and procedures on that. So again, 5 minutes, just, this is our program, this is who you would call, this is who you talk to. I just don't know that we as board members are very informed about that. And then also about giving us updates on the equity committee. And then again, I saw Joe Parisi today.
By equity committee, are you talking
Oh, I'm
about
sorry,
Dan
yeah.
meets with her?
I'm talking about the school.
The school,
based-
not the. Because
not
you
the
will get
community.
updates, all right.
We
got
get
it.
updates from
Right.
Eric on that, but
Got it, okay.
we don't have scheduled updates on the other end.
Right.
And people say, oh, did you know you're doing this? And for instance, in policy, we were talking about the equity policy. Just keeping us up to date on that, and then, again, Chris has done, I know, and with staff, a lot of work, particularly in the last 2 years, on the mental health, and even in the superintendent report, just an update of where we are on that. Because I actually got Joe Parisi said, and how are you doing with your mental health students? I said, we're working really hard, and we've got a whole plan in the system, and, right?
Well, I don't know if we have a way that we deal with when we get individual requests, or whether we're still thinking it should be board requests. But the other thing is, when we talked about things like advanced learning programming, I thought we talked about that. We don't, because we don't have the committee up and running yet, but it is Teaching, Learning, and Equity Committee. So I thought part of the idea of that committee was that committee would delve more deeply into some of the curricular areas, not solely equity issues, but
Mhm.
partly that. So
Certainly,
that,
it's
and then
mission.
that when that committee is dealing with that, then interested board members could come, and then if we felt like it was something we wanted to pursue more at a board level, we could. But I thought that was, for those kinds of curricular kinds of things, that was my thought anyway, I don't know.
These questions were more about the program.
Well, same thing, that's my point, that's
Oh,
what
I
it would
thought
be,
that
that's
was
what it would be,
about
it would be, well, it would be talking about the program, that's part of teaching, learning, and that's why it's a broader title, Teaching, Learning, and Equity. And teaching and learning certainly involves how you deal with your advanced learners. So if that's a topic that we want to choose as the committee, now if the committee decides they don't want to talk about that topic, then maybe you want to see if, I don't know if we have a process, because we didn't have any kind of work.
No, I think we left it open
We kinda
because
left
we
it-
want to wait till we have the committee members.
Right, and see where
chosen
they
so we
wanna
can
go.
determine, because there might be other things that come into play.
And then see whether the full board wants to have that as a report, that's what I'm saying, because that's
Right.
always been an issue, when one board member has a request, and
For
other
a
board members
report.
aren't particularly.
Well, then we need to
Then-
change the policy.
Well, is
because
this-
I've been requesting that particular topic for
Well,
at least a year.
Well, right, I'm not saying they wouldn't, I'm just saying we've never really decided how we were gonna do that, because,
I think
yeah.
Yes.
in terms of equity though, that is part of equity.
Yeah, yeah.
Is taking that into consideration, especially for students in achievement gap or opportunity.
Right.
That's a big piece of it, I think, that, and I don't want to, I don't want to talk too much about it until we have the committee together,
Right.
but that's certainly something I think about as a discussion, so.
That'd be great.
Okay.
And I'm just going back to refreshing with the list that you provided us.
Because the other point is that if an individual board member does have a strong interest in one area, there is always, we always have the option of talking with an individual administrator who oversees those programs and getting that
That's
at a
right.
separate meeting. I mean, that's the other option, I guess, to get that information.
Right.
If you feel like you're not getting information from the board
Right.
at a board meeting.
Right, why don't you, I'm not exactly sure what it is you're after, why don't you, would you send me an email with your
Okay.
request, the
Yeah.
information you
Sounds good.
request? And if, we'll actually just send it to the board, and if there's interest, please
Well,
let me know.
basically what I was looking for was seeing the document that we've had in the past. It basically says during these months or
No,
during this part of the year.
I'm talking about
You're
relative
talking
to
about
the.
in addition.
That, yeah, what should, the.
If you've got a specific request,
For the
right.
advanced learning.
Yeah,
But, yeah, I'll talk to Dan about the schedule going forward.
sounds great.
One thing I'd like to hear coming for sometime in the future is how we're doing with teachers on call. Subwise.
Yeah, I can't hear that.
Teachers on call, subs, if they're filling the subs, are they
Me too.
doing what they're doing? How do we compete now in terms of salary? I mean, the whole kit and caboodle.
How do the subs feel about the program and that's all.
Okay. And there is another thing, actually, Joe Parisi contacted us, he wants to schedule one of our next, I'm assuming you can schedule that in our next, one or two. of our next
I'll
programs.
have an update for you at the
Yeah.
next meeting. I've been in contact with
Yeah,
them, so.
great.
About what? So-
Joe Parisi wants to come in and meet with the board at one of our meetings.
Oh, well, along that line, do we have a plan to have our other legislators come in at some
Well, it
point?
brings it up, we certainly should.
Yeah.
And we should,
Because
we should reach out to them, and I don't know if we want to,
I can do that, I can reach out to them.
Well, we usually, Joyce
They were
does the
all-
reaching out, but we usually,
Agendas for this.
Joyce
This is future
will
meetings.
take care of that. My question was
Yeah.
just, do we want them to come in again? Because we've
Date
had them
meeting
every
dates.
year.
Well,
In the fall, we usually
no,
ask
it's
the board.
content
So
also.
it has to come from, as a request from the full board, and Joyce would do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's call them right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's got them on speed dial, no. They're usually willing to come in, it's just a matter of figuring out a time to have them come in and what's a good
Sure.
time, and, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we should see them at least once a year, I think.
Right. And there is that forum coming, which all of our legislators,
it
Gary
is.
Hebel's gonna be out of town for that one, but that one on the 24th that we can't go to because we have.
Of course it
board
is
meeting, but
election season, they might not be interested for a little bit.
it could be in November, I mean, it could be in
Yeah,
November, because
after
it should be
December.
when, well, there's, well, I don't know when there's session.
We only have one more
Session, I think.
board meeting before the election.
Yep. All right.
Actually, none of them have
Right.
competition,
But,
really.
yeah.
Our guys, so they won't.
All right. Now I'd like a motion to reconvene into closed session per agenda item C for consideration of our limited subjects of business.
So moved.
It's been moved, is there a second?
Second.
Been seconded, roll call vote starting with Dean.
No.
No,
Aye.
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 No.
2, 3, 4, motion carries.